Hi, everyone. I'm Marie, as James just introduced me. I'm sure the majority of the room could probably pronounce my name, which is great. That's not normally the case at conferences. I'm part of a startup called Hopster, which is a TV and learning app for preschool children. What we're trying to do with Hopster is improve screen time for kids by combining high-quality TV shows that engage them and make them want to learn with interactive learning experiences. And we launched about a year ago now. It's almost our first birthday, and it's been a really, really amazing journey from starting out in the App Store with 0 downloads to coming to the point where we're now at well over 180,000 downloads in just the UK. And looking at internationalizing soon and expanding our product onto multiple platforms that are not just mobile. So similar to Andy, we now have a TV app, which is an HTML5 app, and we're obviously looking at Android and other devices as well. And what I wanted to do today is speak about some of the things I've seen in my journey from what was originally a web marketer, web growth person, to someone who has to combine web and app growth, so mobile growth. And I'm going to say something controversial. I know we're at an app-specific summit, but in essence, I think that the drivers of growth remain constant across the board. If you think about the three, I kind of like to categorize it in 3 areas. You have sticky growth, viral growth, and paid growth. They're pretty much, the drivers are the same across the board, but the specific tactics are different for mobile. So I'm going to go through more of the drivers than the tactics themselves. Interestingly enough, Andy's slides, actually, we didn't speak to each other, I swear, but I picked examples and he picked examples, and they don't overlap, so that's a good thing. You won't have to hear the same thing twice. Before that, though, I just want to say that with growth hacking, a lot of the time people think it's about silver bullets or gimmicks, or even worse, that one size fits all, and that's really not what it's about. So when I go through these examples, just think of them as an inspiration rather than something to just copy, obviously. And also think about the fact that when you're trying to achieve like the elusive 10x growth, you need to think about new ideas. So take inspiration, but make it your own. One thing briefly on the scenario of optimization. A lot of us spend a lot of time doing conversion rate optimization and tweaking text, tweaking copies, tweaking calls to action. But what that means is that you might be getting stuck at a local maximum. So always think about the fact that you should do the conversion rate optimization, but don't forget that there might be a higher peak sort of across the valley somewhere else. And with that in mind, look at these examples. So to kick off, I want to start with the concept of the aha moment. I don't know if you've probably seen a lot of these examples from the likes of Twitter or Zynga or Dropbox, where they looked at their journey on the growth they looked at their growth journey and found that there was one specific inflection point where they discovered something in their data that really helped them focus on one key metric and one key thing to improve their product with. So for Twitter, it was the example that one data point was the fact that if they couldn't get a user to follow 30 other users, that user was very unlikely to come back. And that actually applies to my dad. So I applied my best design skills here. My dad joined Twitter, and he went through the flow on his very first smartphone. He was really excited about this Twitter thing. And he didn't follow 30 people, so he's never been back. He's not tweeted since. He's probably not logged in, and he probably never ever uses the app on his phone. Other examples of this aha moment are Dropbox's at least one file upload. Or if you're Zynga, it was they found that when someone came back the day after they installed the app, they were much more likely to become a really engaged user. For you, it might be something like the user has to come back 4 out of 7 times a week. It might be Facebook's 7 friends within 10 days. Whatever that metric is, try and find those nuggets. And I know it's really hard to focus down on one metric, but if you can do it, or at least get one top-line metric to focus on, then do that for your app and focus anything you change in your app on that. That's one thing that was a big shocker for me when I first came into mobile, was the fact that even though before in web companies I had been working very closely with product, it's even more necessary to really work with the product team in a mobile app startup or a company, because you have release cycles and you have all these things to consider which aren't as flexible as they are on web. quick question at this point, actually. How many of you are part of our client side and have an app? Raise your hands. So, okay, cool. And how many would you say are startups versus sort of established companies building apps? Okay, so smaller, so, all right. So just as a disclaimer, my background is from a startup, client side, so hopefully this will be new to some of you, even though it's not necessarily what you do in your day-to-day. Okay, so having done that, I'm just going to whiz through a few tactics and examples I've seen, starting off with exclusivity. I think generally people like to be first to use something. They like to be in a situation where they can talk about how they're using something exclusive, and Mailbox app was an amazing example of using that and really using exclusivity to drive their initial growth. And what they did well was that they actually incentivized virality. It's a viral growth with this reservation waiting list mechanic, which is a very common mechanic, but you'd be surprised at how many campaigns actually tell you to share, but they don't really incentivize you to share. So for instance, if you ever see a competition which tells you to share it with friends, I never do, because I know that if my friends actually sign up, my chances of winning are going to go down, so why would I share? So think of exclusivity, and then use that to potentially implement something that people will be willing to share with their friends, to show how great they are and how ahead of the curve they are. Speaking of telling friends, member get member is an age-old scheme. This is not just something that applies to mobile apps, obviously. But one thing that I challenge you to do is think about member get member and demonetize it, so that users don't feel like mercenaries when they share it with friends. The standard thing is get £10 when your friend spends £10. That's quite boring. It does work, and you can test what works and what the right level is, whether it's £10 or 25. But there are some examples of people doing member get member schemes well, in a way that they've clearly tested and figured out a non-monetized way of doing it. One example, if you're a wine company, for example, you could think of maybe, instead of giving people money to when they share it with their friends, you could say that your member get member scheme is, if you're going to a dinner party, order one of our wines on us and bring it to the dinner party and share it with your friends, and that would be a nice way of tying it back to your product. On the note of member get member, like, mobile apps are net promoter score beasts. I mean, you're getting real estate on someone's phone. So if you look at the apps on your phone, the ones that you actually keep on your home screen, if you're an Android user like me, or that you keep outside of the random folder on your iPhone, they're probably apps that when you show your phone to your friends, or when you're with friends, you will pull them out and you will use them. So keep that in mind. We're really lucky to be, if your app is being used by people, you're in the lucky position that most people will, if you get them engaged, will tell their friends about it in social situations. Quickly on NPS, how many of you are not familiar with the concept of NPS? All right, I'll quickly go through it anyway. So NPS stands for Net Promoter Score, which is a measure of how likely people are to recommend your app or your product in general to their friends and family. And you can measure this really, really simply. There are some great tools out there. For example, Delighted.com does a great job of providing a tool for letting you measure this. What it does is it asks, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to your friends? And then what you do is you take the detractors, so anyone who answers 0 to 6, and you subtract them from the promoters. So that's anyone who answers 9 to 10. And the people who are sort of meh, 7 to 8 in the middle, they're just discounted. And once you actually know who your promoters are, because you can track who's answering 9 or 10, that's a really good base for deploying on reviews. And I'm sure we're going to talk about reviews and App Store optimization later. They're hugely important. And if you know your 9s and 10s, just email them or message them, or in-app message them or push message them at the right times to get those reviews that you need to jump up the rankings. Speaking of rankings and mobileness, so here's something that is actually mobile related, not just general growth. You're on someone's phone, and don't forget that you have channels that you can use which you can't use if you're a web product. And a really nice example from the news aggregation app Circa, which is amazing, by the way, is the fact that they made text text sharing a very core part of their sharing flow. I'm an Android person, so I always had this option, but if you were on iOS, I hear that that's not possible. And they really highlighted that. And the reason being is that 98% of texts are opened, and most are actually read within 3 minutes, to be precise. So really use that to, and then you can include something at the bottom to say, shared via Circa, you should download it as well. It's simple things like that can really drive growth on mobile. And what I like about this example is that it's this, right? So 10 years ago, you got a letter and you were drowning in them, and when you got an email, you got really excited. This is probably a bit out of date now. Maybe 10 years is time flies. Whereas nowadays, you get 500,000 gazillion emails every day. My email resembles a newsletter graveyard. And then you get a letter in the post and you're really excited. And that company that does that will stick out. And if you're a mobile app, this is even more powerful because people don't expect to download your app in an app store and interact with your app and then get something in the post. And incidentally, that's exactly what we did at Hopster this summer, and it worked extremely well for us. And reminded us that not all of these hacks, hack being a controversial word, but not all of these initiatives have to be digital, right? And they don't have to be expensive if they're not digital. So what we did in the summer was a really nice print campaign and gift campaign for existing and new subscribers who basically we sent them a personalized letter with a pencil tin for their children to play with using an IP that we had on the platform. So it's called the Gruffalo or Gruffalo in German, I think. If you have kids, you'll probably know it. And the feedback we got was amazing. People said, I can't believe an app is sending me this, and you're not just an app. And trying to become more than just an app really helps. Like I come from a data and insight background, so branding is not my background, but especially in an app store where it's crowded and many searches are they're either directional or branding based. That brand can really make a big difference. And all this was a lot of elbow grease and some Google Forms for people to actually fill out and claim their gift. So it's really not that hard. Final point here is that every touch point counts, right? From the moment they download or see your app in an ad to the moment they see your listing on the App Store, all the way through to customer support. Customer support is another thing where I think mobile apps, people don't expect as much from mobile apps as they do from web products, although this is changing. Luckily, we're at the forefront, right? If you get this right faster than others, you're going to stick out. Rackspace is a cloud hosting company who have trademarked the term fanatical support because it works so well for them. That's actually what makes them different from a lot of other cloud hosting providers. And there's a famous story where one of their agents was on the phone to a customer and could tell that it was going to take a while. So they put them on hold, ordered them a pizza, went back on the call, and then half an hour later, the doorbell rang at the customer's house, and they got a pizza delivered by Rackspace, which is, that customer is going to remember that, and it really goes through from the very top of the organization to the bottom. So I think when I speak about growth hacking and think about it, it's not just hacking. It's actually thinking about the mindset at the organization holistically, which is echoing what Andy said before. Right. So that brings me on to tools. I think when I first got into mobile, I tried to get my head around SDKs, because you can't just put a tag on your website and push it live the next day. You have to think about release cycles and all sorts of things. And this is don't laugh at me, there's probably loads of mistakes here. This is from eons ago. I was trying to understand tracking SDKs, right? So we've got these aggregated ones that kind of do everything. Then you've got user-centric and ad-centric I kind of used as a separation. If I redid this again now, it would look very different. But trying to get your head around this is really hard, and people talk a lot about development stacks. They talk a lot about what do you use for your development. So I really like the idea of defining a growth stack for mobile specifically, not just for mobile. If you're generally in marketing, this is always important, but think about what your stack's going to be. So what are you going to use to understand your users, and then what are you going to use to act on that? And this is a slightly different stack to what Andy was speaking about. I'm talking specifically about what tools do you need in your app to measure and drive growth. What SDKs do you need? but I'd be really interested afterwards in talking to all of you guys about what you use and how you found like testing different things and switching between different things, because I know it's a real headache. And if someone could come along and make one SDK to do it all, that would be amazing. Right, and that's me done. Thank you.